Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. I'm thrilled to be with all of you tonight in celebration of Damaged Like Me, Essays on Love, Harm, and Transformation by Kimberly Dark. We're joined here, in addition to Kimberly, by Cooper Lee Bombardier, who is an American writer and visual artist living in Canada. He is the author of the memoir and essays Pass with Care, which, if you want to learn more about that, you can go watch our replay on our YouTube of when Cooper was with us at Charis earlier in 2020. Cooper's writing appears in the Kenyon Review, the Malahat Review, Ninth Letter, Cut Bank, Nailed Magazine, Long Reads, Bomb, and the Rumpus, and 15 anthologies, including the Lambda Literary Award-winning anthology, The Remedy, Essays on Queer Health Issues, and the Lambda-nominated anthology Meanwhile, Elsewhere, Speculative Fiction from Transgender Writers, which won a 2018 American Library Association Stonewall Book Award. He teaches in the MFA in Creative Nonfiction program at University of King's College and in Women and Gender Studies at St. Mary's University. And the person we are here to celebrate tonight is Kimberly Dark. Kimberly is a writer, professor, storyteller, and sociologist working to reveal the hidden architecture of everyday life so that we can reclaim our power as social creators. She is also the author of Fat, Pretty, and Soon to Be Old, The Daddies, and Love and Errors. And her essays, stories, and poetry are widely published in academic and popular online publications. So I'm thrilled to have you both here. For folks watching at home, these are two of my favorite writers and just good-hearted folks in the world. So I want to encourage folks to put any questions you have in our Ask a Question box. Make yourself at home in the chat. We love it when you clap, when you offer praise, anything you want to say. We love it. And I'm gonna go ahead and get out of the way and let y'all get this party started. So welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
Awesome. Thank you, Errol. Thank you, Charis Books.
I'm so grateful to Charis for just being, but also for having us on here. And thank you, Cooper.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to talk with you about your book. Happy Pub Day. Today is the actual day, right?
I think it was yesterday officially, but yes, today is the first day that it's actually out.
Happy belated birthday. How's it going so far?
I'm just like, who wrote this book? There's like this moment where you get to know it again. And so it's exciting to do that, with you all.
Awesome. So, a little or anything, but how the person took Charis's advice and just refreshed their browser. I want to start off just with the blurb I wrote for your book, because I just feel like it captures my feelings about it so succinctly. And then I want to ask you a couple questions. I have a few things I want you to just jump in and read. And I have so many things I want to know. So let's get to it. Okay. So I said about this book, like a topo map that transcends our known meridians towards expansiveness and allows us to sit with the past to create a livable future, Kimberly Dark's Damaged Like Me invites us from our stigmatized positions to step closer to our damage as sites of knowledge, indispensable to our healing and knowing. Through personal storytelling and intellectual inquiry, Dark generously restories these locations of damage as places of hope and regrowth, all while asking us to speak aloud how we come to love and let ourselves be loved. This book is an act of queer abundance. And so one thing I so love about this book is that it doesn't feel pressured to be one thing, to have one message. It doesn't collapse all these really rich layers of your identity. They all get to be there on the page. And so I wanted to see if, just to kind of start off, if you would read, I'm not sure I have the arc. So on page 17 and the introduction, to kind of start us off, if you could read a little bit from Discussing Our Damage and Choosing Transformation, that section.
I can.
Awesome.
Yeah, this book has kind of I really appreciated the way that you saw the book and the way that you're talking about it, because I am totally committed to this idea that, before somebody can see you, you have to be you, right? And we have to continually show up in our manifold selves. Otherwise, it is too easy to collapse into a single story about what it means to be queer, or what it means to be fat, or what it means to be female, or whatever the thing happens to be. And I think it's so dangerous in a culture that wants to make hierarchy out of everything, and how to collapse ourselves that way. So I'm going to read the section you just said, discussing our damage and choosing transformation. People who have experienced things that are difficult to discuss have important perspectives. Many have cultivated deep wisdom as they navigate the rough waters of public opinion while reconstructing their lives. It's a bit like building the boat you're steering while at sea and in the middle of a storm. Humans are so astonishingly capable of reinvention that is actually possible. Consider how many experiences we are supposed to absorb into ourselves and not discuss. Violence, verbal abuse, incarceration, mental illness, discrimination, exile, harassment, immigration, homelessness, and most especially experiences related to sexual abuse of power, rape, incest, unwanted sexual contact of any kind. We are all damaged, perpetrators, victims, bystanders. Those labeled as victims become the social location for understanding damage. The rest believe they can visit that place at will, intellectually, as observers, but don't have to live there. But we all live in a world built by patterns of abuse and domination and defined by damage. We live in a world full of hope, resiliency, and ingenuity as well. We are vulnerable, and the ability to harm and be harmed is in each of us. Imagine how it would be if those who have harmed others could be heard and understood, especially in their remorseful complexity. We each share DNA and experiences and popular culture with people who do horrific things. Their humanity is ours as well. Shall I keep going here? Yes. The more stigmatized a position is, the more difficult it is to claim it as a platform of knowledge. I am damaged. You are damaged. I suggest that you claim every bit of expertise in your body, mind, life. The culture needs you. Luckily, the veneer of social hierarchy is cracking, but it's not broken yet. There are more people saying, no, I won't carry shame about having been raped. No, racism organizes our lives every day. Black Lives Matter. No, you can't keep me out of the bathroom because my appearance and choices frighten you. No, I won't refuse to swim because I don't have a bikini body. Everyone deserves pleasure. The more people begin to speak from damage, the more we practice respecting the diversity of one another's experiences, the more we heal each other and become able to transform culture. Rather than needing to build a boat on the stormy sea, the sea calms a bit. The next generation inherits greater building skills. Fewer people accept the illusion that human respectability should exclude some and elevate others. I am telling you that every time you build grace from pain, you serve the common good. You are an expert. You can be a guide. You are worthy of compassionate attention.
Perfect. Love it. So will you talk a little bit about your process of creating this book? Who you wanted it to reach? What kind of conversations you hope it fosters? I mean, you touched on it there beautifully, but say more.
Thanks. So, so I write essays. I also, Love and Errors is a book of poetry. I write poetry. I want to just tell you this, so when I was in high school, I had, honors English, like we're all supposed to be, fancy and smart and everything. And this teacher, honors English teacher, says to me that, you will never be a great writer because you care too much about what you're saying. And I was like, really? I don't understand. Because, people who are great writers are, they only care about language. They care about language, and you care about the meaning of the words. And so, you'll never be. I want to say, like, that sucks. And a teacher should never say something like that. That guy was a dumbass. And I felt in some kind of way freed from greatness. I can write whatever I damn well please.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of went along. I don't have, training as a writer. I mean, I, went to school for sociology, but I write poetry, I write essays. And so a book like this comes together over time. And so a lot of these essays were written really over the last 10 years. And over time, what starts to happen is it becomes clear what I'm yearning toward. And the sum of my work, I feel like, is about this business of, revealing the hidden architecture of everyday life. Like, that's the sum of it, because, it's just, wow, we forget that there is no culture independent of humans making it. Like, it doesn't exist without us. And so we are constantly capable of recreation. And so I feel like that is the overarching thing in my work. A number of these essays are about trauma, in addition to body and identity, which my last book really focused strongly on. Fat, Pretty, and Soon to Be Old was about, what it means to be both privileged and not privileged in terms of appearance and identity. But there's some of that here, but this one also includes trauma and the idea that, like, in particular with sexual violence, you're still shamed more to talk about what happened to you than the person who did the doing is shamed from that. And wow, that's a thing we have to change. We have to shift that. And it doesn't stop being difficult to tell those stories and to talk about those things. And it is so important that we find ways to go, yeah, this stuff happened to me. Oh, it happened to you too? Oh, wow. How did that look? And then what happened? And, because we're not, talking about this, like, the day after Bill Cosby, who, we know, like, because he said so, has raped dozens of women, is like, and
Right.
he's just let out of jail because, well, why? Because the court systems are no better than the dominant culture, right? Like, we can't forget that all of those systems are created from the dominant ideologies that we hold. And one of those, well, multiple, are still misogyny and patriarchy. I think I just rambled. About.
No, that was not a ramble at all. It was perfect. Yeah, it was exactly. Yeah. This is great. And yeah, so I love that idea too of just, we don't need to be surprised that the systems aren't going to be better than the society, right? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to talk a little bit about something that comes at the end in the acknowledgements. Am I still there? It looked like I froze for a second, but
you did for a second, but you're still with us.
Okay, cool. Like Han Solo and The Empire Strikes Back. I'm frozen. In the acknowledgement, you say, "I accept that my work fails, and I will keep doing my part. I'm committed to creatively discussing painful topics while inspiring hope and illuminating ability. With practice, I hope to do it more consistently. I'll continue to hone my skill and effectiveness at writing and creativity. In some ways, they are separate pursuits, wedded in the service of expressing an actionable vision. I hope all people become liberated in ways that we can't even yet name." And so I just love how that foregrounds in the book imperfection, right? And like, imperfection can be okay, and you can still have ideas and you can still share them. And I felt like that was a through line through the book too, of it's not like you have to wait until you become anointed a perfect person to have a story to tell, or that your story is valuable for others to hear. And so I really appreciated that. It kind of worked like a taboo removing spell for me when I read that. And it normalizes that discussing painful topics like you do in the book, it takes practice and hope and creativity, right? And I just felt like it was just, I just really appreciated that a lot. So here's just a tiny little question. So where do you think we are at in terms of an overall milieu in discussing painful topics, and particularly in queer, trans, feminist, activist circles that we all commingle and overlap in? Where do you see us going?
You know, I think that's a constantly moving answer, right? Like it's constantly undulating, and it depends on what we're talking about with whom at any given moment. But the idea, I find it tremendously hopeful, the idea that we accept that we are flawed, we accept that we are damaged, we accept that there is no way out of that, right? Like look, there are things about, like, even though race is sometimes complex for me, I'm a white lady in America. White lady in America means a certain thing, and it is going to infuse aspects of who I am that I can't even understand to fix them consciously, right? So when it comes down to like my identity, that little piece of it, white lady in America, that piece of my identity, I am not trustworthy. Like, I know that that's true. I know it because I know about whiteness and I know about white ladiness, you know, like I know that. And so I think we have to like make friends actually with the parts of us that are untrustworthy. Like that's like, I'm going to do my darndest to make sure that character doesn't hurt anybody. I'm for sure going to do that. But to say that she is bad and wrong when she is a part of my whole story, I don't know that that's helpful, right? It's not helpful because then it makes me want to hide her. And, you know, and really what we need to do is protect other people from the way we might harm them while we all find the dialogue that you're talking about, that you're asking about right now. So I think that it is super helpful that more people are talking about their marginalized experiences right now. And it's not enough to my mind yet. You know, I think we need enough of that, first of all, that those experiences become trustworthy. Like, I'm still blown away by, I was just speaking recently with someone about being a dietitian, and this was in Britain, but I feel like it's probably the same here. And this person was saying, "Oh yeah, you still can't admit to having had an eating disorder if you want to be a dietitian." And I'm like, how is that possible? Like, how is that possible? Because it seems so basic to me that a person develops professional interests based on their personal lives. And so why would that not be true automatically, that a certain percentage, probably higher than in the regular population, have had eating disorders? But because these are still, you know, these kind of identities, and sexual abuse is another one, you know, they're counter to credibility. Right. That's what needs to shift. So, and I think part of how we do that is by having more and more and more of these conversations. And we're going to piss each other off a little along the way, because we're not ready for why would we be ready for how all of those things intersect and cause us to hurt sometimes?
Yeah. And I love that example you just gave. It's like of the dietitian, like it's like saying, if you ever broke a bone, you can't be a doctor.
Exactly.
Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
If you've ever been sad, you can't be a therapist. Like, it just doesn't, you know, it's like, yeah, it's amazing.
It is amazing. And it's also tied up in, I think, some of that stuff is tied up in the devaluation of feminine perspectives, because that is a profession that is still scratching for credibility a little bit, because it is a female dominated profession. And, and the same is true with race and, other things as well. Like, if you want to understand, I don't know, a hurricane came through and, you look for an eyewitness account. Of course you do. But if you want to understand racism, somehow you don't talk to a person of color. I mean, that, it's like we need to shift, like, who is allowed credibility. And I don't know, for me, just a lot of things come back to how race and gender, those two things, organize our world.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I interrupted you with more rambling.
No, you didn't. No, you're great.
I'm self-conscious about the fact that I'm drinking from this airplane bottle. Like, I would never drink from a tiny plastic bottle like this. I just want to declare. But I've been traveling, and so here we are.
I think it's great that you're hydrating. So when it comes down to it, you're hydrating. So
that's the basic.
Would you read from? I'm trying to make sure I have my questions printed out here. It's a fairly short essay, so I think we have time for you to read the whole thing. Trigger warnings and the myth of the oversensitive student on page 77.
Mm-hmm. I think I can.
Yeah,
I have not read that one out loud yet, and so this is the first time I will do that. And so I don't actually know how long it takes to read this, but I will trust you that it is not super long, for sure. This is a, trigger warnings. It's a thing, right?
Yeah.
So my mother has always had a big dog for her companion. Purebred, large, obedient. Currently, it is a standard poodle. Before that, a Bouvier, and then a German Shepherd. When I was growing up, there was a Norwegian Elkhound, a Samoyed, and the earliest one, an Old English sheepdog. One might say she loves dogs, but I'm not sure about that. I would think she would say that, but it may be more accurate to say she loves having a dog. I don't think they're the same thing. When I was about 12, a Doberman darted out in front of the car when my mother was driving. We weren't far from our home and moving slowly, single file in traffic. We both shrieked when the car struck the dog, and I carry a visceral memory of the back wheels lifting, bones cracking as we drove over the dog's rib cage. My mother began sobbing and repeating a shrill, "My God, my God, my God!" The dog must have come off the leash or out of the yard, because the owner was there in an instant, at the back of our car, looking to care for the dying dog. I don't know if he blamed her or not. When I started to roll down the window, my mother screamed for me to leave it up. I was stunned that her horror about the dog turned so quickly to anger toward me. See, I thought we were going to stop the car and attend to what had happened. We didn't. She drove on, muttering, "I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't." And then the rest of the day, I heard her tell the story of the horrible thing that happened to her that morning in running over the dog. Schooled as I was in hysterical outbursts, my initial response was to twist my body around to look at the people hovering over the dying dog. I shrieked, "You have to stop. It's not right. We have to go back. We have to." But as usual, her denial won the day, and she was the one driving. I soon fell silent as she sobbed, "I can't, I just can't." I understand that we also experienced a significant event, but I felt more damaged by her early departure, her inability to see a tragedy through to grief and sadness, rather than cutting it short with denial. Not quite 15 years later, when her German Shepherd was ill, she handed the leash off to my husband to handle her dog being euthanized, again muttering, "I can't, I just can't." I can think of other minor incidents of passing off tasks that simply didn't seem ladylike to accomplish. That's what I thought at the time. There were things that with a man around, she simply shouldn't have to do. See, she may enjoy having a dog, but there's a peculiar lack of evidence that she feels something as deep, complex, and abiding as love. I had already given thought to trigger warnings when University of Chicago passed a ruling in August of 2016 declaring that professors should no longer use them on campus. I have never used this term in my own syllabi when I teach, and yet, for many of us, explicitly feminist educators, social scientists, and humanities professors who handle the stuff of everyday life, namely the contours of privilege and oppression, we are aware that people have been hurt. They will be triggered by our themes of study. Students deserve our respect and gentleness. I tell them specifically that we will be discussing difficult themes when I teach courses such as body and identity, or race and inequality, or marriage and the family. I tell them that they should look after themselves and offer some suggestions on how to do that, though certainly non-prescriptively. Most importantly, I tell them that I will do my level best to create an environment that allows for respectful disagreement, exploration of difficult topics, and still, I won't allow any groups or individuals to be belittled, even those who we think are not in the room with us. I also tell them that I can make mistakes too, and I need to be questioned on occasion. I revisit these messages as often as needed as we navigate material that is, at turns, difficult, enlightening, entertaining, fascinating, and challenging. I do it in order to keep people in the conversation, not to give them an escape route. I mean, let's be careful with language. I want everyone to know where the escape route is on a topic they simply can't handle anymore on a certain day or in a certain way. Sometimes when images are involved in our study of violence, for instance, I give alternative assignments. I want to build an environment that makes it easier to stay in the room when things are difficult. That's the part over which I have some control, the culture and environment of learning. My explicit aim is to enact a pedagogy of love in which transformation is always an option for the students, for me, and if we continue our studies and active creation of culture for the society itself. Love requires presence. It's deep and complex and not always capable. When I have a student who wants to opt out of discussing a certain topic or is simply checked out, not paying attention, and I can't tell why, that student maintains my respect. I also want to know, especially if a student is concerned about grades, how they have engaged the themes of study. Needing to turn away from a topic of study at a particular moment does not mean failing to consider it deeply at some point. Much as my mother turned to me with anger when I challenged her decision not to attend to what she had done by running over that dog, it's easy for professors to turn quickly to students as the source of irritation when we are questioned. It's easy because often they are the ones revealing a problem, suggesting that something in our approach be slowed or diverted. Professors, due to institutional and personal constraints, often feel seriously challenged when asked to slow down or reroute. Now, sometimes I find student desire to opt out to be problematic. I have had students claim that they shouldn't have to read a book that contains so much profanity, for instance. I've had students claim they shouldn't have to discuss queer families because it's wrong and it goes against their religion. Students, plural. On both of these topics, female students have claimed that these kind of assignments should be optional. I have also had male students simply check out of discussions and assignments dealing with pornography and rape. I've had white students check out in discussions dealing with racism. In these latter cases, the disconnect happens without verbal pre-planning, but if I inquire about the checkout, I hear that those topics are just too much. I see heads shaking and, do I imagine it? Eye rolling. In considering who is damaged enough by a topic not to want to discuss it, Often it's those who don't want to examine their own positions of power or privilege, who feel that they shouldn't have to engage. This is very different from feeling triggered by past trauma. See, it is possible to want very much to be in school and yet not to have a love of learning. As with my mother's relationship with dogs, it's possible that I can't. Really means I shouldn't have to. For some students, the trigger warning is a way to stay in the discussion, to know what is coming, to look after oneself. For others, it means, I don't want to have to talk about this because it is uncomfortable. Why do professors and policies like the one at University of Chicago seem to focus more on the latter interpretation? In my experience, it is the more rare. Literally every student who stays in the conversation benefits from a classroom environment that honors their discomfort and helps them to plan ahead. In her article, Against Students, Sarah Ahmed cautions us to pay attention to the broad sweeping statements made against students who seem oversensitive. I agree wholeheartedly with her that, quote, oversensitive can be translated as sensitive to that which is not over, end quote. She says, quote, the idea that students have become a problem because they are too sensitive relates to a wider public discourse that describes offendability as a form of moral weakness and as a restriction on our freedom of speech. Much contemporary racism works by positioning the others as too easily offendable, which is how some come to assert their right to occupy space by being offensive, end quote. The difficult truth is that not all professors are setting up a culture of respect and environments of study that are conducive to deep, respectful learning. Neither do the systems within universities support those kind of classrooms, and the institutions themselves often seem more interested in profit and prestige than anything else. Do some get it right? Absolutely, right down to the administration that supports learning. Note, I didn't say up. There are instructive and often predictable patterns in who feels they shouldn't have to discuss certain topics, just as there are predictable patterns in the types of folks who hold systems accountable to respectful practices. We have to make time and sometimes challenge ourselves to attend to those patterns. We also have to navigate a good amount of ambiguity as both creators and responders in learning environments. I mean, sometimes when systems are damaged, like when professor pay is inadequate, when sexual harassment is the protected standard, as two examples, it can feel like we're repairing the ship as we steer through the storm. Guiding people's learning about difficult topics is a challenging job under great circumstances. There are no simple fixes here. We need presence, accountability, and respect. Sometimes we need patience, sometimes urgency. To add complexity, it's definitely possible for professors to be committed to feminist education or anti-racism education and still not have all the tools and relationships sorted out well enough to prevent seeing overly sensitive students as a problem. We should always see it as an instructive thing, as events worthy of contemplation and action. Similarly, the responses we receive from students regarding trigger warnings can teach us something. There are also patterns in faculty responses to student requests for sensitivity. These responses require a more immediate intervention. Under no circumstances should accusations of sexual harassment or racism be recoded as student sensitivity. When we see that and tolerate it, and even when we hear students comment or read in social scientific studies that it is likely occurring even when we don't see it, then we are letting down our responsibility as educators. Sensitivity is good. Even if we don't know what to say or do immediately, it's wise to continue pondering situations that don't feel right without labeling them too quickly. We can find trusted colleagues, preferably across institutions, with whom to discuss situations for perspective. We can reject any interpretation that seems to valorize how things were done in a previous time period without being clear about who benefited from those circumstances. Dear student, how will you attend to what needs attending to in our subject matter, even if you can't come to class on a certain day or you can't do a certain assignment? This is my question. I ask the same of myself, my colleagues, regarding our responsibility to engage liberatory pedagogy and attend to student concerns. I question the support of the institutions in which I am implicated, whose work I perpetuate. I remind myself that I am capable of applying what I've learned and that I am not beholden to institutions. We are actually co-creating our relationship. I am not a traumatized child screaming in the car about injustice and the failure of love. I understand something about power imbalances and accountability, and I'm capable of learning more. Scholars like Ahmed help me, and hopefully we both help others. I've witnessed and sometimes suffered from my mother's failings. I have also experienced love and nurturing from her. The systems in which we work as teachers can both nurture and abuse us as well. It's a complex relationship. Of course, we do well to remember that we are not children at the whim of adults whom we must please or risk destruction. It's not enough to shut the office door and look after ourselves when things get hard. That is just surviving. And although we shouldn't have to engage deeply with the flaws of our institutions, it is part of the work that we have taken on to do.
Oh, so good. I really wanted to hear that piece as someone who teaches, and it's an important part of my life as well. Like, I thought it was a really important discussion. And that metaphor, you know, that kind of comes through the piece of, you know, the mother hitting the dog and the narrator being like, I thought we were going to go back. Yeah. Really just lingers with me, because there is that space to go back that we can't undo if we've stuffed it up, right? In the classroom. Like, I always think about every day in class, it's like you're making a boat out of paper and you're pushing it into the water, and it might sail across, or it might just can't get it back. You know, so, but what we can do is we can, the next day in class, say, hey, the other day I didn't prepare you all well enough for the material we were going to read, and I think it caught some people off guard, and that was my bad. You know what I mean? Like, there's that, there's space, I think, to, yeah, I mean, it's not like as educators we'll never make mistakes, but I think there's more room in there to kind of acknowledge and discuss and apologize, or, you know, say that you're working on a certain aspect of something to get it to get it right, to do it because thing. Yeah, anyway, I just thought that was really, I really appreciated that essay. And I'm curious, like, how does your role, sorry, did I lose you?
Oh, no, you cut out for just a moment. How does my role, I heard that part.
How does, I don't see you anymore though.
Oh no. Oh no. Technical difficulties. Can you still hear me?
I can totally hear you.
Okay.
But it seems like your camera might not be on, but I'm not sure how to get that back.
We can still see you both. It's just an internet thing. So just keep going.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm curious if you would talk for just a moment about how your role as an educator influences your work as a writer and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. So look, I stopped at a master's degree. I don't have a doctorate. Bell hooks can explain better than I can why there are problems with the institution that that made me think, oh, this is not the best way to learn things, and I don't. And I knew I didn't want to make my full-time home in the academy. That was not going to be my thing. So as a teacher, I love to teach in a university classroom. I absolutely do. I also love to teach other places, and to always hold in mind, like, what does, like, Freire's idea of liberatory education, like, what does this actually mean? Because to me, like, it's not enough to teach Freire's books. We have to figure out how to teach like Freire, right? Like, that's actually the thing. And so almost everything about university classrooms prevents that. I've said to students so many times, right, like, that when I finally snap, it is going to involve hurling desks off of a balcony, because they cram too many people into, try to put too many desks in a room, and we can't see each other. And I'm like, how the fuck you have a conversation with people you can't look at? I can't do it, right? So, so like, we're always trying to rearrange and, think that through. But a lot of how I started doing the lectures and storytelling performances and interactive stuff that I do on college campuses when I travel, because that is still a big part of my work. I mean, I've been doing a lot of it online the last year, but that still is a big part of my work. That stuff comes out of the ideas related to popular education, that we have to find the place where, like, I have to find me in the story you're telling somehow. Even if your story is about living in the top of a tree in a jungle by yourself I have to find myself in there somehow, even if that has never been my experience. And then we have somewhere to go, and we have, like, a tension, that is not just ironic, but an actual relationship. And so, so anyway, these are the things that I always keep in mind. And it honestly is how I started, because I was a live storyteller before I ever had a book out for 20 years. I was doing spoken word performance and, live storytelling, because it allows for complexity. And it also allows people to look at my body while I talk. That's another significant thing, right? That we are embodied as educators. And I love what you said about, like, you push the little paper boat out, and sometimes it's like, wow, and sometimes it sinks, and, like, because it does feel weirdly metaphysical, doesn't it, teaching? Mm-hmm. Like, it's like I can do all the best planning I can, but if something is off in the room, it doesn't work. And like, we're constantly trying to go, like I'm orchestrating a thing, but I'm also in the thing. And, so I love what you said about going, debriefing the last time, mm-hmm. right? Because we don't have control. And what beautiful tragedy that is. I mean, what a beautiful tragedy. I mean, I love a little structure, I do, but what a beautiful tragedy it is not to be in control.
Yeah. I love that. You said something about, this wonderful history of storytelling and spoken word. And that makes me want to ask a little bit about that, in terms of, obviously we're not doing a lot of live storytelling and spoken word these days, but how does that influence you as a relationship?
Okay, the last half of that sentence cut out. How does that influence me?
Oh. Yeah, your history as a spoken word artist and live storyteller, how does that influence or come across on the page for you? Like, how do those things talk to each other, those mediums?
Yeah, so there is a sense, a lot of people have commented with this book and my last collection of essays that they have a sense that I'm talking to them. And I think, I didn't plan this, but I think that's part of the legacy of being a live storyteller, and that I literally am talking to the audience, even if it's a story in the third person, or it's that there's something of that comes through. So I already mentioned, like, I was freed from greatness by my honors English teacher in high school, and I never thought that would be something. I knew that I wrote to understand things and to help people understand me. But it didn't occur to me that I would have published books for a long time. And the thing about spoken word performance and storytelling, though. So I was co-facilitating a creative writing group at the Gay and Lesbian Center in San Diego in like 1992, and my co-facilitator was like, "Hey, we should invite writers and have a reading, and let our students read and I was like, "Oh man, that sounds like a lot of work. I don't want to do that." I really was just kind of like, and he goes, "No, you're good at the talking part, so you'll be the MC. I'll arrange the authors to come." And so we started doing these events, and that was my introduction to spoken word performance. And then I found Poetry Slam, which is like immediate audience feedback, where you go like, okay, this isn't working, this is like, I really do think that like, it's silly to judge poetry, but the judging element of slam improves people's writing very quickly for a period of time, and then it stops. But I do think that I think it works really well. Like, it's a quick on ramp to being a writer. That's what I think. And it was true for me. Back there in the early 90s.
Yeah. I mean, my entree into kind of thinking of myself as any kind of writer was through spoken word, right? And the kind of concurrent scene that was happening in San Francisco at the time. And so, yeah, for me, that idea of, writing a thing and then just being like on stage that night is so raw. It was so raw. But so, like you said, that automatic feedback loop was so important. Yeah. And hearing how your ideas sound in space, right? To, and how they feel. I felt it was very important.
Yeah. I think it is a really quick on-ramp, and I love, that people figure out, it doesn't have to be Poetry Slam, but that people figure out how to do that in person. And, and I know that a lot of people are doing it online in different ways that are innovative now too. It still is a long way between that thing you do on stage the first time you've written something and putting together a book. It's a long, windy path to that. Yeah. But it's definitely the same road.
Yeah. I'm not sure how long we're supposed to go before we start the Q&A, but I want to continue to hug you and all to myself before we open up for questions. But Errol, if we need to open up for questions, just voice in let me know.
You're good. We don't have any questions yet, so this is a good time to remind folks. Please put your questions in the Ask a Question box.
Awesome. Yeah, we'd love to share your questions. So something else I wanted to just kind of mention too is I mean, no surprise to you because you're the amazing author of this book, but I just really appreciated the way that a sense of an embodied narrator is completely present in every single sentence of every essay. The sense of embodiment to me, like, really anchors the narrator. This consciousness, I'm always telling my own creative writing students, I'm like, give this voice a body. This voice needs a body. And for you, it's like, she's always there. It's so good. Like, this body, there's the mothering body, a fat body, a femme body, a sexual body, a harassed body who walks up to the car and just is like, look, pal, when you talk to me like that. And it's like, and it's so good, I feel like the way that you keep the presence of the corporeal self throughout is just really, really vivid. And again, maybe it's that thing too of the storytelling of like finding that commonality. Like, I'm talking to you, you're talking to me, making these more complicated ideas relatable through lived experience, through storytelling, through sharing, I
want to say I learned something about this doing live storytelling. So the first full-length theater show that I wrote and toured was called The Butch Femme Chronicles, Discussions with Women Who Are Not Like Me and Some Who Are. I will never give something that long a title again. And that, that show was, it was storytelling about butch and femme and how those roles come up, how we do intragender gendering. You know, it was a show about that. Okay, and people liked it, and I thought that I had written something like I thought it was because I was a great writer. People liked this thing, and then as I started listening to feedback, because I toured that show for a number of years, and across mostly mid-sized cities in the United States, and people were repeatedly saying it was amazing to look at you on stage saying those things for an hour and a half. I kept looking at you, and then I realized, right? Remember, this was pre-Ellen coming out on TV, right? And the idea that someone claiming to be a lesbian was standing on stage saying intimate stuff was so radical for an hour and a half, right? Like, that. And then similarly, a few years later, when I wrote a show about being fat, and, it was like people is the same thing. It was like you saying these things, but feeling like I have permission to sit here and look at your body while you're saying these things is mind blowing. And this is what I learned, though, over the years about this kind of storytelling, was that to the extent that I literally am talking about experiences I have had in the body you can see right now in front of you, wow, that made a difference for audiences. So it became the thing that I hoped to keep on the page. That, as we're moving toward being a book, that has to stay present somehow.
Yeah, but these things are not theoretical. These things are not like just floating in the ether. Yeah.
And they're also not common to see. The human who has that experience, it's not common to see. I think if I were performing the Butch Femme Chronicles today, it would be perceived so differently because our thinking has moved on about those things. And queer folks are on TV and movies, and there's bad films made about queer people. I forget which terrible holiday film I saw that almost made me want to stop watching TV. But, there's all kinds of, we are involved in banal media now too.
Right.
So it's different. But it still is radical to talk about being fat. It still is radical to talk about being genderqueer. It still is radical to talk about making family in different ways other than marriage or single partners or lots of things, right? So, vive la différence.
Well, and also there's this level too of it's radical because this is a body that's been talked about, and now this person is speaking from this body for herself, and that I think that's still hugely important, even though we are like on banal television. There's trans people and doing boring things on TV and also exciting things, right? But it's such a trip when I think that kind of, the idea of seeing queer characters who aren't the butt of a joke or like totally victimized or the recipient of massive violence is like, it still just blows me away, even if it's just like have questions. I'm going to check the little question box. Don't be shy.
Don't be overwhelmed.
Yeah, just come on in. So, well, for now, while people are composing and thinking about their questions, language, I didn't write down the page number. It is Language, Queer History, and Misogyny. There's a section titled Meaning and Reference. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I don't have the page number right in front of me. Oh, no, I do. Do I? It's page 148.
Hey. I don't remember what this says. You want me to read some of it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes? All right. This is, yeah, from Language, Queer History, and Misogyny. Meaning and reference. Hey, we have to agree that language means something. It's representative, after all, never the actual thing it's standing in for. When discussing identity, we are the things being described, and we are constantly in motion. Even when sitting in stillness, the body is always moving, eyes fluttering, heart beating, cells vibrating. We are growing and decaying. And when we rub out one word on a page, it leaves a trace. The word palimpsest has its origins in Greece, where writing surfaces were used again and again. It means rub smooth again. I mean, we really don't have to agree that language is referential. We already have. Femme is not feminine, but references it. Butch is not masculine, but references a type of masculinity that is hard won and maybe defiant. A type of masculinity that can be inscribed by a word, but never totally defined by it. The word boy means male child, but a BOI is something like a man. The way a grown woman with short hair and a masculine stance in a suit or jeans and t-shirt often looks like an adolescent boy, a young man, only softer. How did BOI erase soft butch? And why are we not discussing the rest of the meaning that the word boy carries? I want to always remember that even though our queer histories have not been writ large in culture, we are part of a broader tapestry of self-making, sex-making, love and lusting, family-making. It stretches through all of time. I don't see how it could be otherwise. If I am not careful, I too behave as the young college student at the beginning of this essay, as though I know what's quaint, what's radical, and whom to admire based on appearance alone. Of course, we are most familiar with our own predilections, but it's time to habituate the effort to see further than our own classrooms, our own bedrooms, dungeons, time periods, nations, and even species. I have been fierce femme, sexy mama, big mama. Only rarely is mama, writ large, considered sexy. I am a planner caretaker in a fertility fetish body. I started out as an ample snake goddess and am aging into the Venus of Willendorf. I have what some have called physical credibility to go along with my identity leanings. A past lover whom I called daddy scoffed once at another self-made daddy, slight of build, short. No physical credibility, she said. Of course, the speaker was nearly 6 self-aggrandizing feet tall, bodybuilder muscles. I called her daddy, and I mothered her as well, but she never said that word. The comfort provided by women is meant to be invisible, unspoken. Further, mother has been de-eroticized, even though mother is the earth, the round hills, the sweet breeze on sweaty skin, the salt and musk of bodies made by coupling. Everything we say is referential to misogyny as well, even though we think we are talking ourselves out of that trap. Opting out of pain and complexity is the particular brand of normalcy we seek. The perfect privilege of male innocence equates to normal in our culture. And we never have to talk about it. Maleness is never meant to be accountable to the damage it does to non-men. That's the social pact. We are never expected to talk about what is normal. Normalcy comes with its own entitlement to privacy. When I think of someone who is soft butch, I still picture an adult who can manage a mortgage, clean the rain gutters, and then make dinner. Boys, BOI, they might be wrestling in the park or out on the town, hitting a few strip bars like men whose first responsibility is to their own pleasure. I made an offhand joke once long ago from the stage at a primarily queer venue. A small group in the audience, pals by the look of it, had identified themselves as boys, and I vamped, BOI, I suppose. There was nodding and laughter. The term was becoming common right around then, but it was still new. I quipped coquettishly to the audience, "Well, they're cute, but what's happening with all these boys who never grow up? Give me a full-grown butch any day. Mama's tired and needs a little help fixing the world." The audience howled, punctuated by some particularly deep hoots, which I imagined to be validation from my butch fans. Neither body modification nor identity modification are new. Neither is renaming, for that matter. I wish to never speak of trans-exclusionary women again, and yet there is something about living that draws us into conflict, makes us feel the small hairs rise whether or not the fight arrives. Kai-Cheng Tom in Why Are Queer People So Mean to One Another discusses how queer communities act from trauma pathways, since we share a marginalization that makes everyone look like a threat. Generative conflict is key, though. We cannot sustain ourselves on call-outs. I don't let other bigots hijack my choice of topic and style of discussion. Why is it so easy to allow when discussing trans exclusion, which I do not consent to call feminist? Shall I keep going there? Oh, you are not audible.
Am I not audible?
Now you are. Now you are.
Oh, I touched the thing.
Yeah.
I touched the thing. But I loved the discussion in this chapter, this essay. And have you ever read Times Square Red, Times Square Blue, Delaney?
Wonderful, wonderful book.
There's so much good stuff in there about queer history, but he uses this term in there of rhetorical collisions, right? And the example he uses is at one point coming out into queerness, coming out into gayness meant a person's first gay sexual experience. And then not long after, coming out means, hey, mom and dad, there's something I have to tell you. Right. And so he's talking about like the rhetorical collisions that happen where the person who is of the generation where it meant they just got down with another dude or got down with another lady for the first time is bumping up against somebody who's like, I just announced to my employer that I am LGBTQ, so forth and so on. And I just think it's like, I love that language, and it helped me kind of, I think, sort of zoom out that this isn't like something 2021. This isn't something 2020. It isn't something, that started in the early aughts. It's been around because language is always moving. And we're always repurposing it or taking it back up or doing something fun to it. And that's why we're here, right? That's why we write. But how that kind of, I think, how that has changed in recent years with just the speed by which this language gets transferred is, thinking about like using a term like BOI, for boy, in the early 90s on stage, how that, those things were like word of mouth. Mm-hmm. Those were learned in community. Those were learned on the street or, from your pen pal.
and also really fun and really charming and really appropriate to exploring, because like language is constantly moving, but so is human desire.
Yeah.
Right. And and then I also think it's perfectly appropriate for someone like me to come along and, question the thing, right? Like it's like doing the thing is almost the first step always. It's like we found some joy and some traction in this. And then it's time for somebody to question it, right? Or multiple people to question it. And then it's time to talk about it. And then it's time to go, oh, what do we mean? Right? But it's like none of those phases is wrong.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I think it's, I was thinking a little bit about like how those rhetorical collisions can be sometimes really cute and like sweet and funny. Like, I thought about a younger friend of mine, a trans woman friend who is 10 something years younger than me, who was like wearing a bandana around her neck, and she's like, I'm flagging. And I was like, flagging for what? You know, but it was very cute. She, you know, she was like, likes to wear like things without pockets. She needed a place to put her hanky, you know, but then it, you know, it gets tricky when it's like, did I lose you?
No, I just love that. I love that.
I love it too. It's so sweet, right?
I just had this experience because I'm visiting my son, and my son is queer polyamorous, has a, you know, like a family group of 4, and I was meeting 2 of them for the first time this last trip, and one of them consistently, I don't mean just once, I mean every time I saw them, was wearing, you know, a certain hanky out of his back right pocket. And so here's me, like, I'm like, you know, they're in their 30s, right? I'm, you know, older, and I'm like, I suppose it would be inelegant of me to ask. I almost said, especially like the third time I saw it, I almost said, so are you flagging something, or just wearing a fashion statement, or do you just need to wipe your brow? I don't know. I'm just curious. I mean, it's all right either way. I mean, what? Oh, wait, I'm his mother. Never mind. But I was curious.
Yeah, because it's like it's language.
It is.
So we have a question in the chat, if it's okay to segue abruptly into that, because I'm kind of ADD. But someone named Julia asked this really great question about, to both of you. I was wondering, in listening to the essay on trigger warnings, some of the ways that you prepare your students for an upcoming sensitive topic so that they can determine if and how they can participate. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
So I'll give a simple answer to that. I mean, I think there are a lot of answers, because it's like, you know, preparing an environment that works for exploration is complex. And listen, I'm sure that according to some students, I didn't get it right. I am sure of that. But it is a thing that I try for. It is a thing I try for. So I don't specifically talk about trigger warnings. I talk about how we are going to discuss difficult stuff. And life is big, and it's about to seem huge. And that will sometimes feel like you're lost at sea. And I don't want you to feel lost at sea. I want you to feel like there's a safe harbor over here. And so the key to me, for me, and I actually have stickers printed, and I hand them out to, you know, everybody I've ever met in a classroom or an audience, that say, do no harm, take no shit. Because that is, I think, the personal edict that helps us through, right? It means figure out when you should shut up because you might hurt somebody. And remember that this topic is big, and people have experiences you can't imagine in whatever it is that we're discussing. But also take no shit. That means don't grin and bear it when something feels wrong. And definitely tell me if I have not made an environment that maintains, you know, adequate, like, we can't always have safety, but I think that we can have adequate respect. So it's a little speech I have. It's also there's a little bit in the syllabus, but it's, you know, my do no harm, take no shit speech. And that is one answer to that for me.
Since the question was for both of us, I'll say too that I think a lot of it's about planning, like get your syllabus done on time. Yes. You know, and so people have at least a broad stroke of what's coming up the following week. Kind of just normalizing early on in the, you know, first class meeting, like if there's, you know, anything that comes up, when you look over the syllabus, just reach out. My door's open. Let me know what you need. I have like all this language about, I say I don't offer trigger warnings, but I do my best to offer content notes about what's coming up, and that I'm going to do my level best to never gratuitously show something, share something, or have them read something that is harmful, right? I just think about, like, I went to art school, like right out of high school. I went to like a state, it was like the only state all art school in the country at the time, might still be. I made my tuition working at a supermarket in my hometown, went to this little school, and I just have like professors showing like these Renaissance paintings and whacking the screen with their pointers and talking about tits and ass, and literally in the class, and I was just like, what? Like, why? I just thinking about how just like, so it was so like this need to be provocative and the most banal way, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, wow, you're so radical, like, and I think about that a lot, of just like when people kind of roll stuff into the class, again, that little paper boat, but it's without thought as to what the impact of it might be if that reflects on someone's lived experience or whatever. So another thing that I do, and this, I'm glad you were talking about popular education, because to me, I feel like that influences my teaching so much, but like popular education, experiential education, the first class, if we're in person, I pull an empty chair to the front of the room and I put it there and I say, everything we're reading in this class is about real experiences. It's about real lives. It's about people who are still living, people who are living with the generational effects of these things. And everything we're reading, everyone we're talking about, I want you to imagine they're sitting right here in this chair with us in this classroom, right?
That's beautiful.
And to just kind of think about it as not abstract. Like, we're not having thought exercises about rape culture here. You know what I mean? And I think just, again, I totally screw it up. I remember the first time a student was like, why didn't you give us a trigger warning? And I was like teaching Close to the Knives by David Wojnarowicz. And I felt so like I remember that feeling, like the first feeling I had was I felt embarrassed and shamed. And then later I'm like, no, I'm the person with power in this situation. The student said something to me as the perceived person of power, whether I feel like I have that power or not, as an adjunct part-time person who might not have a job in 2 months. Like, I have power in this situation, right? And so for that person to come forward to me and say that is already kind of going uphill against a lot. And so the next class, this is, the thing that I was kind of talking about was the next class, I said, I assigned this reading to you all before I gave you my rationale for asking you to read it. And here is why. And I'm sorry that I didn't prepare you adequately for the reading. And I feel like anytime a student has said, why didn't you do X, Y, or Z? Generally, it's because I didn't take the time to prepare them for what was coming. And so that's on me. So I think just acknowledging that, like, especially when we're like part-time adjuncts who are underpaid and overworked and piecing together work from a whole bunch of different sources, it's like we're just flying by the seat of our pants half the time. And, and I also try to be I never used to, but during COVID, I was like, I'm not a tenured professor who teaches one class a semester or 2 classes a semester. I teach in 3 different universities at once. I also do freelance editing. I also teach, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm spread really thin. And so you need to know that just, I'm doing everything I can to show up, but so I think there's some ways that I like to try to just humanize the situation. Do we have other questions? Sorry. Thank you. I love your suggestions too. Any other questions from folks who are tuning in?
I think that y'all have had such a robust and good conversation that folks are, maybe a little shy, or maybe just feel sated and full. So, which is always a nice way to be.
Well, Errol, would you like to come back and talk about how people can purchase Kimberly's book?
Yeah, let me do that. Ooh, bless you.
Excuse me.
So Thank you both so much. So the link to Damaged Like Me is at the bottom of your screen now, this teal button. We would love for you to buy it from Charis. You also can buy Kimberly's other books. You also can buy Pass with Care by Cooper Lee from us. We would love for you to do all of those things. And we encourage you, particularly those of you who are educators, consider, doing like a book club around Damaged Like Me, because I think these questions of care in public spaces and of consent and how we talk to each other and all these things, these are so important for how we show up in the classroom and how we show up with one another in these pedagogical places. So, I really encourage you, if you can find a couple other, teachers, even if you're not all in the same school, but maybe, get together and look at this book, because I think it does have just so much to teach us about how we can take no shit, but also be kind to one another, right? And show up for one another. So thank you all. So yeah.
Can I just add something, since you've mentioned book groups? On my website are resources for Fat, Pretty, and Soon to Be Old and the Daddies, like discussion guides, also audio playlists. I mean, I am really interested in supporting you having discussions about these things on your own. There's not a discussion guide yet for Damaged Like Me. It just came out yesterday, but there will be soon. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you mentioning that suggestion, because it's so important to talk about what we read.
Is it KimberlyDark.com or .net?
.com.
Okay, I'm putting in the chat. Folks, go check it out. And do either of you have anything else you want to, any upcoming events or anything you want to lift up before we go?
There's always stuff on my website calendar. You can certainly have a look. I do a monthly free event on the first Tuesday of every month, so it's coming up next week, called The Hope Desk. And I talk about 2 types of social inequality each time. And my thinking is that it is hopeful when people know enough about basic inequality to be able to have civil conversations about it. So everyone is always invited to come to the Hope Desk, and the Zoom link is on the web page at the home page at the bottom.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Coop, you got anything for us?
You can always just check the events on my website. I don't have anything on the books right this second, but it's summer. Chilling out. I was where you were a year ago, so starting the book stuff. So I hope you have a great book tour.
Everyone should read Cooper's book if you haven't. Pass with Carrie is wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, and go watch our talk from last summer on the Charis Circle YouTube channel, because it's a great conversation. So thank you so much to both of you. Thank you for this book, Kimberly, and I hope that y'all enjoy the rest of your summers.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Yeah, thank you. Take care.